Good evening and welcome to Web Speech Platform Podcast. I'm William Baxter. Tonight I will be doing part two of Realities of Being a Self Advocate, which is published in my book, Web Files. I will be doing the interpretive reading. I did the reading of part one a few days ago, and tonight I'm doing part two. And in the near future, I'll be reading part three and four. So without further ado, Realities of Being a Self Advocate, part two. People with disabilities make up the number one minority group in the United States of America when it comes to dealing with prejudice, ignorance, and hatred. Don't I know it? This is something that I pretty much have had to deal with my entire life, especially when I was going through grade school during my youth. Despite being born a forceps baby and with Tourette syndrome and being different, I was mainstreamed in society and regular educational and social settings most of the time, even though I did have some special education during my second and third grade years, and then later on during my 10th and 11th grade years. As a youngster in grammar school, one of my mainstream leisure activities was developing some music activities. Right after my fourth grade year, I started to learn how to play the accordion, and a year after that, the alto saxophone. I played the alto sax from 1967 through 1974. And when I attended Trident Junior High School in Anaheim, California from 1968 through 1970, there was an active special education program for people with IDD, that's intellectual developmental disabilities. But I was not part of that program as I had been mainstreamed by my family since the fourth grade when I attended Francis Scott Key Elementary School, also in Anaheim. Many kids resented me because I was different and they felt that I didn't belong with them. In the fall of 1969, I made the Trident Junior High School Advanced Marching Band as a second string alto saxophone player. I sat next to the two tenor saxophone players who resented my being part of the saxophone section. I won't mention their names. In fact, a lot of the band members made me feel unwelcome. Not because I couldn't play the sax, I could play it very well, but because I was different and they were down on that. The way that kind of prejudice and ignorance works is that the tenor sax players and the other band members, would never own up to that. The way prejudice works in a situation such as this, that it didn't really matter whether I could play the saxophone on an advanced band level, but simply I'm different and I don't belong, and I have no business being in an advanced band. This is why self advocacy is needed. Unfortunately, I let all this prejudice and hatred defeat me in a way that I started losing interest in playing the saxophone more and more until I finally gave it up altogether after high school. This was one of the biggest mistakes I have made throughout the course of my life. The best form of self-advocacy here would have been not only speaking up for myself, but continuing to practice and continuing to improve. If others see how well you improve and strive to get better, they could eventually come around. Playing the alto saxophone was eventually replaced by singing. I first became interested in singing in a choral group when I was living in Fair Oaks, California, Sacramento area. A year or so after moving from Sacramento area to the Washington, D.C. area, I began attending Thomas S. Wooten High School and became a member of the Wooten High School Concert Band. I also played in the band. I became a member of the Wooten High School Concert Choir, but I also played in the band at Wooten High. While my interest in playing the saxophone decreased, my interest in singing increased. My interest and abilities in singing have been on the increase to this day, even in my old age. I have been singing in church choirs since 1975. In the early 1980s, I became interested in being a soloist, and I have been doing that ever since. I took private voice training, mostly from an opera singer, throughout most of the 1980s. I did encounter prejudice many times on this journey, but this time I didn't let it defeat me. I kept trying all the harder and speaking up for myself when necessary. This is what true self-advocacy is, but there are limits. Sometimes being a self-advocate doesn't win popularity contests, especially when it comes to exposing prejudice and ignorance. This is another important function of a self-advocate. There are still people out there who feel I should not be performing solo in public or even in a small group. This isn't because I can't sing well, because I can. A lot of people feel it isn't fitting for me to singing solos or singing in small groups because of my disabilities. There are also some who draw the conclusion that when I sing in church, God isn't being glorified, and that I am only trying to build myself up because I am developmentally disabled. This I encountered in Orange County during the last couple of years as I lived there before moving to Colorado. As it turns out, many people have been inspired whenever I have sung solos in church or anywhere else in public. And so God has been glorified. It's amazing how a person who is developmentally disabled, such as myself, is told he can't sing solos in public or he can't sing in small groups when in fact he has had years of professional singing experience, having sung in a chorale and once in an opera back in the mid 1980s. He had also sung the national anthem at professional sporting events for several years. But they make sure that this person in question can't cut it regardless. My response to something like that is usually fine, but I'm a professional singer and I can sing good or better than anyone here. I did something like that a few years back. I said that one, as I said, that didn't win any popularity contests. Exposing prejudice is one of the hardest functions self-advocate needs to perform. And quite often, a self advocate will make social mistakes. However, prejudice and ignorance need to be exposed. A self advocate should not shy away from exposing prejudice. And uh, if he makes a social mistake, he should learn from the mistake and try to correct it so he can become a more effective self advocate. This is one of the challenges of self advocates in our society today: exposing and dealing with prejudice. We need public speakers who are self advocates to speak out in the school districts against student bullies who harass and torment other students, and children with disabilities, especially if there are any children or teens with disabilities who have been mainstreamed. This kind of prejudice and harassment should not be allowed in our schools, and there should be harsh penalties for student bullies who harass and torment students with IDD just because they are different, and the bullies feel they don't belong. It is the harassment and bullying that does not belong in our schools. This is another reason we need self advocates. Excuse me. Sorry. It's getting close to mid spring. Yeah. Time for allergies, just like during the fall. But that's the reading of part 2 of my self advocate diaries: Realities of Being a Self Advocate. I will be back with part 3 later on. Now, I will be here on YouTube for my podcast web speech platform for a couple more months before I break for the summer. But my other podcast is Frontier Folk Singing with William Baxter, and I decided to adjourn early this year until mid-August because I was having technical difficulties with this computer earlier, and it turned out to be I wasn't getting enough charge from my battery, and all I needed to do was unplug it and plug it back in. But this is Web Speech Platform, and I'm Bill Baxter. You all have a good night now, and enjoy the rest of this weekend.